Lenny was facing going into 7th grade, and our local junior high school is atrocious. You know, it's just, I didn't want her in there.
Thomas's elementary school did a good job meeting his educational needs. We were concerned, however, that the same level of attention to his educational needs wouldn't be met at the next level.
Public schools sometimes don't have the resources or time to sort of dive deeper into what a student might be passionate about.
Families are generally assigned to a school by zip code, as you know. And those zip codes tell you what school you're going to go to.
We shouldn't expect that any one school will best meet the needs of all the children who just happen to live in a certain geographic area.
You don't get the ability to opt out of those schools because you don't have the financial resources to access the private education marketplace the way your wealthier peers do. And because you're there involuntarily and can't leave, we don't have to ensure that we give you an education worth.
In 2011, New Hampshire State Senator Jim Forsythe began work on what would become a major education reform in his state.
So the education tax credit bill is a bill that helps needy children go to the school of their choice, whether that's a local public school that's out of district or homeschooling or the private school of their choice.
Families that can move to a different district or can afford to pay for their children to go to private school kind of already have this built in, right, this in place. But families that otherwise couldn't afford those options are stuck.
The program works like this. Corporate taxpayers in New Hampshire make donations to scholarship organizations, nonprofits that provide assistance to parents that wanted to send their children to a new school. Low-income parents could choose private schools, religious schools, even homeschooling or another public school. The corporations, for their part, would receive a tax credit of 85% of the donation amount. It's not unlike taking a tax deduction for a charitable gift. The scholarship organizations would fund students to the tune of about $2,500 each, some more and some less, depending on need. It was the first school choice program that included specific provisions for parents who wanted to homeschool their children.
Adam Schaefer from Cato Institute showed us how that homeschooling could be added into the tax credit program and the legislation. We immediately jumped on that as an option for this program.
If a parent chooses to homeschool their children, which is a significant commitment on a parent's part, I think people felt they wanted to make some sort of an assistance there to allow you, again, as many options as possible. It's significant because previously I think people had thought, well, we can't do anything for homeschoolers.
We were the first in the country. My understanding is we have a number of families that have benefited from being able to take that as an option for their family. What was holding them back, believe it or not, was the cost of the materials.
The program endured an intense battle in New Hampshire's legislature.
I went to St. Lazarus School as a kid. I went to St. Joseph's School. My parents didn't get any tax credit.
I do rise in opposition to this amendment. This is wrong. It's unconstitutional.
What this is about is some basic fairness. It's about the good of competition.
We should be doing more for public education, not finding ways to withdraw from public education.
This is an opportunity which is going to save our community's money and provide an opportunity for people that don't have it today.
You're ruining the very basis of our society.
There are roughly 31,000 private school students in New Hampshire. Those parents have donated around $470 million to the public school system in reduced education costs. And we're squabbling about giving a few $2,500 scholarships back?
Make a choice. Pay for it. Pay for that choice.
Over a governor's veto, the program started in 2013, but opponents continued their fight. The program survived a repeal effort by a single vote in the Senate in the next legislative session.
So when I saw that legislation pass, I knew that I wanted to start a scholarship organization. And so January 2013, which really was the first day that I could file the paperwork to become a scholarship organization. I did that, and I was approved by the Department of Revenue in January of 2013, and I've been doing the work ever since.
I connected with Kate through email because I had some questions initially about the program and wondering if we were a family that might fit.
Brandon Fide is a single dad and a public school teacher in New Hampshire and a recipient of a scholarship from NEO. The scholarship made the difference in being able to send his daughter Alika to Kimball Union Academy in northern New Hampshire.
Right now, that tax scholarship represents a choice for us, and I think that as a parent, I really value having that choice. I knew that it would be the best option for her with her personality and many other things, but I didn't know if we'd be able to afford it. So at that point, when the program started to take shape, I thought, well, if that is a way that might help me fund her education, I'm all for it. The small classes, the variety of classes, the high expectations for academics, I think all of that has been great.
I'm taking Spanish and Chinese, and I don't think I'd be able to do that anywhere else, so I think that's really great and unique. This is the first year where I've been excited to go to class, and I want to learn and I want to see my teachers, which I don't think I'd be excited. I wasn't excited to go to class last year, so it's really different.
We knew when he was about 2 years old, when he learned his alphabet, learned all the states and capitals, we knew that he was different. And we wanted to make sure that he thrived in whatever academic environment he was in, whether it's public school, homeschool, or private school.
Earl and Alice Tucson are engineers by training. They now run Red Manse Farm in Loudon Center, New Hampshire. Their oldest son, Thomas, attends the Beach Hill School, thanks in part to the scholarship program.
We attended a school choice event about a year ago, and that's how we found Beach Hill School.
The pace is better for me. It's not really slow. It was in my old school. And they also go a lot more in depth.
Without the scholarship, Thomas would have attended a different school that we didn't feel would have been quite as good a fit for him.
Lenny was facing going into 7th grade, and our local junior high school is atrocious. It's just, I didn't want her in there, so she was looking at maybe homeschooling again, and she didn't want to do that. So I said, why not, we'll apply for the private school.
Sonia Bruladakis is a married mother of 5 in Manchester. The scholarship helped the Bruladakises send their oldest daughter, Eleni, to nearby Liberty Harbor.
They do a classical education. It's more based on history and language arts.
Within a month, we had to give a $1,000 deposit. So I have nowhere to wear. I didn't have it. So I gathered up my jewelry and my engagement ring and my mother's jewelry, because I said, my mother would value Eleni getting an education more than me holding on to her diamond, So I sold those things and I made the deposit.
Families make incredible sacrifices for their children. I mean, your children are your top priority, okay? And particularly families that have challenges understand that they want their children to succeed and be in a position that's better than the position that they're in.
I was on like a mission. I was gonna just sell whatever, anything of value that I had, so that we could just pay down the tuition, and so it would bring the monthly payments down once we got going. But then a couple weeks later, Kate called my husband and said, oh, we'll pay the rest of your tuition for you. And I just was like, oh, what a blessing, what a gift.
In the first year of scholarship tax credits, the program received more than 1,000 applications from parents. NEO, then the only scholarship organization in operation, awarded more than $128,000 to more than 100 students from 62 families. And just a few months into the program, the Cato Institute's Jason Bedrick conducted the first survey of how parents reacted to the scholarships and their children's new schools.
Our survey found that parents were overwhelmingly satisfied. 97% of parents said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with their chosen home or private school. Even within the first 3 months, nearly 70% of families reported that they saw measurable improvement in their child's academic performance.
Last year I raised $250,000 for scholarships, And of that, I was actually able to use about half. And unfortunately, I had to return half.
It's like an IED, an explosive device planted in our school system that goes off slowly over a period of years.
Opponents filed a lawsuit attempting to have the program thrown out by the courts. The lead plaintiff in the case of Duncan v. New Hampshire was local businessman Bill Duncan. The suit claimed the money donated to scholarship organizations was actually public money, and the program therefore would violate the state's constitution. Duncan received representation from Americans United for Separation of Church and State and the ACLU. Duncan, his attorneys, and other plaintiffs declined to be interviewed for this film.
New Hampshire Constitution has a Blaine Amendment, which says you can't take taxpayer money and spend it on religious schools. So that's the argument that they made, that this is taxpayer money, and that's exactly why they kept calling it a voucher over and over again.
Voucher system, voucher program, voucher system, voucher, the voucher children, the voucher bill.
Because they wanted to make that argument, well, it's not a voucher program, it's a tax credit program.
At trial, Duncan prevailed in part. The trial court prohibited religious schools from receiving scholarship students, and Kate Baker had to return more than $100,000 to corporate donors.
What they said was, we can't give scholarships to a family who want to use them at a religious school. And that did eliminate a very large part of our applicants. So we weren't able to help a lot of families that needed help, and had to return some of that money because of this legal battle. I, of course, hope justice will prevail in New Hampshire very soon, and I'll be able to help families regardless of their beliefs. I've never discriminated against someone. I don't want to start now.
There is a distinction to be made between direct appropriations made by the legislature and awarding tax credits to private individuals to incentivize certain activity.
As the case moved to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, Dick Comer at the Institute for Justice intervened on behalf of parents.
There are no state appropriations under a tax credit program. It operates the same as the tax deductions we're much more familiar with, or the tax exemptions that we're familiar with.
Using that tax credit structure, it resolves a lot of the issues that some of the earlier programs have had, while nonetheless preserving a parental choice and allowing for maybe the maximum level of freedom and opportunity to use the scholarship essentially anywhere.
In 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court dealt with exactly this issue. Does the existence of scholarship tax credits make the scholarship funds public funds? The Supreme Court said that until the money enters the public treasury, it's not public money.
The Arizona Supreme Court case was clear that tax credits are not taxpayer money.
If you can't have the tax credits that help parents, how can you have a tax exemption which directly benefits churches and religious schools, among other charitable organizations? It would be a colossal undermining of what New Hampshire has always accepted as legitimate legislative activity.
This is case 2013-0455, Bill Duncan et al. Versus the State of New Hampshire et al.
It's your position that none of the plaintiffs have standing in this case, right?
Yes, sir. That's absolutely right.
And why?
This program uses the state tax system to divert funding away from public schools to religious schools.
Local property taxes or whatever, that's okay?
The very facts in this case tell you what proportion of schools, the private educational institutions in New Hampshire, remain religious. And many of them are. Somewhere over 50% of them are. And they receive direct aid from the tax exemptions that New Hampshire has awarded from time immemorial.
If the lawsuit prevails, what happens to the students that NEO is currently helping?
So education tax credits have already been to the U.S. Supreme Court and been proven to be constitutional. I think justice will prevail in the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court will agree with the U.S. Supreme Court and other Supreme Courts across the nation that it's constitutional.
If the opponents of this program prevail, what happens to the students that NEO is in the process of helping?
I'd like to spin positive.
I understand that.
Yeah, and I don't want to put my resume together, Caleb, and not be able to help families. My intention is to help them to be able to get the education that they need for their children.
It would be an enormous, enormous transfer of power from private individuals to the government. The government would now essentially be able to control everything. And the motto of New Hampshire, live free or die, would become some sort of ironic footnote in history, because now the government would own everything.
In a unanimous decision, the New Hampshire Supreme Court threw out Duncan's lawsuit, stating that Duncan and the other petitioners could not show that they had suffered a personal injury as a result of the scholarship program. Alika Fide is now a sophomore at Kimball Union Academy. Her father, Brandon, says the scholarship program continues to allow him to send her to the school of his choice. Thomas Tewson is now in 7th grade at the Beach Hill School. Alice and Earl Tewson hope to send their 2 other sons to Beach Hill with assistance from a scholarship. Eleni Bruladakis did not return to Liberty Harbor in 2014. Her mother, Sonia, blames the lawsuit. Eleni now attends a just-opened charter school in Manchester. Bill Duncan was appointed to the New Hampshire State Board of Education on May 8, 2014.